This is Red Ice Radio. From the visible to the obscure. RedIceCreations.com.
Hi ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Henrik Palmgren. Thank you for taking the time to tune in. This is the one and only Red Ice Radio, coming to you online since 2006. A beacon of sanity from Northern Europe. Not afraid to ask why, who, and what. We're encouraging you to hold on to your inquisitiveness and sense of adventure in an era of dumbing down, ignorance, fear, and mass hypnosis. We're trying our very best to give you a balanced approach to many of the fascinating, intriguing, but also difficult topics that we cover. Essential in these times. Non-sensational but inquisitive, open-minded but rational and questioning at the same time. RedIceCreations.com. That's the home of Red Ice Radio. Check out the website for much more. New design, new updates, and new easier RSS feeds for our members. Thank you also for the praise, lovely emails and support. We do like to hear from you, and we welcome your guest and topic suggestions as well. Today we have a very interesting program for you. We are going to hear about the claims of Anthony Sanchez about his book UFO Highway and the interview that he did with a Colonel X, an insider, about the activities and ongoings at the secret Dulce underground facility under the Archuleta Mesa on the Colorado-New Mexico border. Anthony Sanchez received his Bachelor of Science in Computer Information Systems from Western Governors University of Salt Lake City in 2008. In addition to being a software consultant for the state of California through his own company, Anthony has been employed for 16 years as a software engineer, working for 3Com, Intel, Acer, Netscape Communications, and Hewlett Packard, performing high-level software development, supporting scientific engineering and business intelligence projects. He became interested in UFOs back in 1989, at the time Area 51 surfaced as a public phenomenon. Since 2000, he has researched the subject matter thoroughly, employing various scientific methods and hands-on approaches, thus compiling over 20 years' worth of UFO-related research data. Every year, he is a regular visitor to the desert of the American Southwest, visiting crash sites, conducting interviews, and performing scientific fieldwork. UFOhighway.com, that's Anthony's website. Stay tuned as we dive deep into the secret history of mankind, the Greys, the aliens agenda, and the world of Black Ops military programs. All right, thank you for taking the time to talk with us here today. Welcome to Red Ice Radio, Anthony. Good to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Henrik. I really appreciate it.
You bet. I mean, you have a really interesting story, Anthony, that we're going to hear more here about here today. It's contained, obviously, in your book UFO Highway, and we're going to get into it, obviously. But just at the outset here, maybe you can just tell us the premise of UFO Highway. Give us a little bit of the background first, Anthony.
Well, there's a bit of an interesting history with the book UFO Highway, because initially it had nothing to do with Dulce. And, you know, today the most popular aspect of the book UFO Highway is the Dulce interview. It's an interview that I conducted in 2010 with a retired United States Air Force colonel who claims to have worked at the facility in Dulce, New Mexico, at an underground facility that is both scientific and in nature as well as military. But most people don't realize that when I first began writing UFO Highway, it had nothing to do with Dulce. It had everything to do with Area 51. I had an entire section that I was going to devote to Area 51. I had actually conducted interviews with Norio Hayakawa and Jorg Arnu, who's probably the foremost expert on Area 51, I believe, outside of Norio Hayakawa. And but everything shifted in January of 2010. You know, this whistleblower source of mine who I worked with back in 2007 at a semiconductor company that I worked for. I don't want to say the name of the company on the air. I don't want to get in trouble. But this individual in 2010 introduced me to the colonel. The colonel was interested in work that I had done as part of a blog that I had ongoing on a server at that semiconductor company. It wasn't available to the general public, but it was available to, you know, roughly 30,000 employees within the semiconductor company that I worked at. Mm-hmm. It was on human origins. I discussed human origins, you know, the question of, you know, the earliest vestiges of humanity. Where did we come from? Why have we accelerated so quickly with our level of intelligence? Why do we have genetic markers that different from every other species? Zachariah Sitchin, Lloyd Pye, Scotty Roberts, all of those. Pretty much I synthesized a lot of their data. Then I began to ask my own questions. So that's what UFO Highway was about in the beginning. But today, very controversial. The Dulce interview, that's what's taken off, and that's what's caused this firestorm in the UFO community with regards to my book. There are people who are pro UFO Highway, and there are people that are anti UFO Highway.
Right.
I have to tell you that 99% of the people are pro UFO Highway. There's one small faction out there who I'm not even going to name, who do not believe the provenance of the documentation provided by the Colonel. But I can tell you, it is real. He is real. He exists. And this is a very, very important story that needs to get out, because there's human rights violations that are being conducted there in Dulce, New Mexico. There's the cancer rates that are off the charts. There are liberties that are being, taken away from people. And, we just have to really delve into outing the facility there and getting to the bottom of this story. So for me, I don't have time to argue with these researchers, these fellow researchers of mine, who, they're very, very much into that whole political aspect of ufology, trying to make names for themselves, trying to get into the news, trying to, this is one-upmanship that I seriously do not want to be a part of. I don't have time for it. I'm conducting real ongoing investigations. I have another one right now with Project Leonid, which is talking about this New World Order faction that is in China, out of Hong Kong, Li Ka-shing, who essentially owns the Chinese military, the Chinese Communist government, and there's a bunch of atrocities going on there. So this is not a game for me. This is not a, let's see how many books I could sell at a UFO convention. As a matter of fact, I give my books away for free. And I have hundreds of people already who can attest to that. So I'm not in this for, to try, there's no ego involved here.
Right.
I'm in this for very, very serious reasons.
Excellent. And let's backtrack a little bit here. We're going to run through the story, obviously, and hear about what the information is that came to you from Colonel X, obviously. But when you first, met with him, what were you told about him ahead of time? And obviously, what was your kind of, I guess, your first impression? Was he believable to you? Did you kind of feel, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about right away? Or how was that meeting for you guys?
So I had dealt with my other source, who I call Trinity. Trinity was telling me that there was an individual that was very interested in contacting me with respects to my human origins work, and he had some shocking information for me. And I said, okay, this is fantastic. I'd love to hear what his story is. The information that I had already received from Trinity was the basis for Project Leonid, so that was already off the scale for me, off the charts. And I was a little bit overwhelmed with his information. But I was writing UFO Highway. I had just finished this whole Area 51 portion of the book, which by the way, never made it in. They would have put the book in over 450 pages, so I just decided to take it out. Mm-hmm. I finally got a phone call from the Colonel. I wasn't as intimidated over the phone as it was when I actually met him in person. He was a very, very serious individual, very stoic, and unlike Trinity, when Trinity was telling me his information, I just got a sense of a high level of authority coming from this guy. And, I'm telling you, this guy is the real deal, and he's not someone who would make up stories about, atrocities that are being committed against innocent people. It's just not going to happen. And
so it felt genuine to you right away, pretty much, right? So.
Right away,
yeah.
Right away. And not only was I picking up this sense of believability from him based on our meeting, but, and this is the controversial part, I had actually submitted a standard Form 180 to the National Personnel Records Center. And I did that expedited under a California multiple award schedule. It's called a CMAS credential through the company that I own. I hired active duty reservists and retired military personnel for my company. It was like a consulting company. We did, a lot of cable management, software development, networking, those types of things. And a lot of military personnel come back with technical experiences, and I get points towards federal and state level contracts to hire former and active military personnel. Mm. I expedited the standard Form 180 through the CMAS, using the CMAS, something that I'm allowed to do. But unfortunately for me, it was not supposed to do that for the purposes of UFO research. I was supposed to only do that for legitimate state and federal level contract work through my company. I got in trouble for that. I did get in trouble for that. But that's one of the reasons why, there's so many people going against the document itself that arrived. The DD-214 document that arrived from the National Personnel Records Center, it is in pristine condition. There's like one clerical anomaly on it. I don't know if you've ever seen DD-214 discharge papers, but if you were to go to Google and, do a Google search on DD-214s, there are literally thousands and thousands of examples of DD-214s out there. Some of them are handwritten. Some of them are used with typewriters from years gone by. Some of the newer ones that are even computer generated have, handwritten corrections with initials and whatnot from the, whoever the discharge authority is. Mm-hmm. So the separation authority. So anyhow, there's what. That's what this whole argument about is, with respects to the validity of the kernel. But it's real. The document's real. I don't have time to argue with these people. I'm telling you, Henrik, this is a real retired United States Air Force colonel, and the information that he has cross-correlates with information from way too many other sources in the UFO community for it to not have actually happened and to not be real.
Interesting. So what was some of the background here of the colonel, and furthermore, did he ever reveal to you why he wanted to give you this information? Did he operate on his own, I guess, or was this part of a larger plan, Anthony?
Well, he operates part of a group called COM-12. COM-12 stands for Counterintelligence Operatives Movement, and the 12 is my understanding is that there are 12 cells, and theirs was the 12th cell of this particular, group, this underground group. Trinity and the Colonel are part of this COM-12 group. The COM-12 originates from U.S. Naval Intelligence originally, but today it's something entirely different. It operates under a totally different directive, and his information was being provided to me. The reason why he wanted me to get this information out was one simple fact. There are innocent people being abducted through my lab's programs there in the Four Corners area of the Southwest who are being taken. They're never being seen again. He knows for a fact that at one of the facilities there in Dulce that they're being utilized. Women and between the ages of 18 and 35 and young boys between the ages of 10 and 15 are being abducted in that area, and they're being utilized for various experimentation, genetic experimentation, breeding programs, and super soldier programs where they're taking these young boys and they're injecting them with high levels of like testosterone and other types of hormones and chemicals and whatnot, and they're doing this, illegally. This is illegal, and it's Dr. Michael Sala says that this is a human rights violation. Well, the colonel agrees, and that's why he came forward. That's why he gave me the information that ended up being the Dulce interview, which is, he was stationed out of McClellan Air Force Base in North Highlands, California. From there, he was part of this classified medical detachment that responded to Type X events. This is anything that involved the military. Classified projects, whether or not they were UFOs or experimental craft, any type of accidents or deaths or incidents, involving injuries, he responded to those events. These are called Type X events. And he had the authority, under the U.S. government, under the military, the U.S. military, to make, decisions right there in the field, whether or not an individual was fit to return to duty. That was his directive. He had a set of protocols that he had to follow. Those are listed in the book. And again, none of this is made up. This is very real. And I have researched everything that this man has provided to me, and I now am a firm believer that there's something there in Dulce. And I found proof that there's something there in Dulce.
And we'll get into it. Obviously, do you know how long he was working with this particular, project, if you will? Then, and furthermore, is he retired now? Do you know?
He is retired from the military now, but he is still an educator. He carries 2 postgraduate degrees in psychology, and he teaches at a university. I can't say which university, but I can tell you that it is a university with campuses all over the country. That's about as far as I could go on that. And I hope I just didn't give too much information away. But they'll never find him. They'll never find him. He is so well protected within his circle of people that he operates from.
Right. Some listeners out there might wonder. I just want to wing this by. There was 4 or 5 years ago or so. There was a video released online called "The Secret Underground Lectures of Commander X." That's not associated with this in any way, is it?
Not at all.
No.
It has nothing to do with Colonel X or Mr. X. Mr. X came about through Project Camelot. Colonel X came about through UFO Highway. Those are the only 2 individuals that I can verify as being real people, and they do share a connection, which I can get into if you like.
Okay, interesting. By the way, so you talked with him, and what happened there? By the way, did you record this? Did he have a problem with you, taping it? If so?
No, I actually have an audio recording of the Colonel's conversation. I have that, but I don't have any video.
Okay, yeah, interesting. Okay, so obviously before we get started here, we want to listen about what the story what has happened here in Dulce. But what is Dulce for those who don't know, Anthony?
Dulce, New Mexico, is the northwestern part of. It's actually the northern part, the most. What's the word? It's the most. It's the furthest north. What's the word I'm looking for, Henry?
It's okay. Yeah.
It straddles the southern border of Colorado. It is northern New Mexico. It is the Hickory Apache Reservation. It is a sovereign Indian nation. It is sovereign Indian land. The United States government has no business being there whatsoever. And according to the Tribal Council, there is no military presence there in Dulce. There has not been a U.S. government or U.S. military presence there since the cavalry. This would be in the 1800s, last passed through there. Mm-hmm. So, if people in Europe, I'm pretty sure they're, educated. They must understand that within the United States, the indigenous American Indians, all of them have traditional tribal lands which are sovereign nations. These are recognized as sovereign nations. They have their own passports. They have their own presidents, their own vice presidents, tribal councils. It's an amazing structure.
Interesting. So, if we talk about the legal issues here for a little bit, if this is a land that belongs to the Hickory Apache Indians, could this be then why a faction of the U.S. military or U.S. government basically have potentially placed the facility in this area because this might actually make them to get away with certain things? What do you think?
Absolutely. No, I absolutely agree with that sentiment. That's exactly what's happening throughout the United States. There are many American Indian reservations that are facilitating black budget projects on the part of the military industrial complex. Dulce happens to be one of these places. Now, I'm not saying that there's a level of that there's collusion going on between the Apache, the Hickory Apache, and the U.S. government. But I will say that there's the high likelihood that there's a level of innocent compliance, something that may have already been instituted 30, 40 years ago, and that the people today who were babies back at that time, who now run the tribal council, who now run the Hickory Apache Nation, they probably just have a fleeting memory of what was set up in the past, and maybe they have a set of rules that they follow internally that are unbeknownst to us, that that are unknown to us, that they just don't see as anything outside of the norm, outside of being normal to them.
Mm-hmm. So obviously, I know you had a long conversation with Colonel X, so we won't be able to go through it all. I mean, obviously, we want to relay people further to UFO Highway, the book, for the full story. But how far back did he go? Did he begin with the incident, the breach back in 1979, or where did he begin the story?
Well, the story began with respect to the conversation. I was interested in the 1979 event. That's what I wanted to know. I got a little bit of it from Trinity that this conversation that I was going to be having with this colonel had to do with something in 1979. It had to do with something in Dulce. And I immediately went online, started researching, and I saw all this information that was out there. And I said, okay, there's no way in hell I'm going to believe anything this guy says, because it's going to be a conversation about reptilians and abductions. And, I started looking into this Paul Benowitz character. But the minute I sat down in front of him, I knew that this was not a game. I knew that this person was going to give me something different from what I was seeing on the internet. And sure enough, I walked away with a completely different story. A couple of the same players, Phil Schneider in particular,
right.
Paul Benowitz, Myrna Hansen. So yeah, this was a real, if there was something real behind Dulce, it has to be this guy's story. There's just too much critical information in there that I have, since, conducted further research on. It just keeps proving to be true. And it's just, so again, this is why I wholeheartedly believe in the Colonel and the Colonel's story. And I take him very serious, now. So at first I was skeptical. I was very skeptical at first, but now I'm not.
So was he working personally on the base back in '79 when this happened? And obviously we'll get into what happened as well.
Well, he was part of that classified medical detachment out of North Highlands. This is McClellan Air Force Base. And he responded to incidents all over the United States, including like Guam and the Philippines, just about anywhere there was a military base of any kind, whether it was Air Force, Army, Marines, and U.S. Naval installation, even ships. I heard that he was helicoptered out to, ships that had certain types of Type X events, experiences that, required their specialty of his group. In 1979, though, he responded to this event in Dulce, and when he got there, he thought, well, they all thought, the people that were part of his party, there was 4 of them, they thought that was just going to be this, they were told it was going to be they had 48 hours to conduct their business. They were essentially there to perform analysis on individuals, psychological and behavioral analysis, and even medical analysis on these individuals, and it was a very specialized team, his group. Turns out he ended up working at Dulce for the next 3 years.
For that long, yeah.
Yeah, for that long. Yeah, up until his retirement. His retirement. And he was part of this group called DSD-3, which stands for Dulce Security Division 3. Now, there are 4 branches of the military, but there are 3 proxies in Dulce that operate out of White Sands Missile Range. And one of those is the U.S. Naval Proxy, which also has an umbrella over the United States Marines. So that's why there's 3 as opposed to 4 in the DSD-3 designation. There's a group at Dulce called Installation Command, and he essentially was chosen to facilitate the position of a liaison. He facilitated communication between the DSD-3 and Installation Command. And he also, was chosen to work there because of his specialization. So, yeah, he had a definite, career there at Dulce.
Do you know if these programs, including obviously the base, all of this from the construction of the base to maintenance, everything costs money, right? So, do you know if this is under Black Ops funding, or do you think that there's any official paperwork about all of this at this stage?
Oh, there's definitely official paperwork out there, but it's not going to reference the construction of the Rio Arriba, facility, the Dulce underground facility. But we now know how things get funded out in Dulce. This is one of the discoveries that we just came upon, and it's now in the newest edition of UFO Highway. A year ago, UFO Highway was released as a PDF, and it was never, ever meant to be released as a PDF file, as an ebook. What happened was I was going through some personal turmoil in my life at the time. I had a loss, and I was going to abandon my UFO, I was going to abandon all my work, essentially, my research. Mm-hmm. And I actually sent out an email to several thousand people who had already taken an interest into the work that was ongoing for UFO Highway. These are people that contacted me independently, wanting to know what I was working on, how is it going, and if they could help. Well, I sent all of them a message telling them that I'm sending everything to Norio Hayakawa. I'm leaving this business for good. If you want to get in contact and discuss this, no longer contact me, contact Norio Hayakawa. I was essentially going through a divorce after 22 years of divorcing, and I had small children, so it really affected me.
Yeah.
But the good news is that many of my friends, high-profile individuals in the UFO community and the research community, came forward in private and told me, do not give up your work, take the time off, handle your personal life, but we need you to work on this. And one of them in particular, Bill Ryan from Project Camelot, was very ardent that I released what I had as a PDF. And I explained to them there was no editing, no professional editing, there was no proofreading, nothing. And he says, people are not going to care, they're going to respect the data. That's what they care about. So I did, I released it. And, the book was well received, and there was just, unfortunately, there was just tens of thousands of illegal, copies, downloads, and I really don't care about that. But now that I have a hard, cover printed book, the publishing company, they're real particular about how the data gets out there. But anyway, in this new version of the book of UFO Highway, there's a lot of new information, and that last piece is in there. So, yeah, especially, I talk more so on the fact that, finding connections to Danny Castellero and Michael Riconosciuto and everybody involved with another underground facility in California, the Cabazon Wackenhut underground facility. That's a lot of brand new information that just came out. But one of the things that we did was we discovered how the money's going to Dulce, how Dulce gets funded, how Dulce gets, funding for brand new facilities, brand new equipment, brand new personnel. What they are doing, Henrik, is they're operating under the umbrella of the technology commercialization offices out of Los Alamos National Laboratories. Los Alamos represents a collective of some of the most brilliant minds in the United States, if not the world. Many Europeans work there in Los Alamos. It's part of, we got a lot of engineers there from Germany, from France, from England. They're, from Norway, from Spain. There's a lot of individuals that I personally have met that I know they're here on, what do they call, worker visas, that they operate for, whether or not it's for federal contractors, federal subcontractors, the military directly. Some of the most brilliant minds are right there in Los Alamos. And coincidentally, some of the most richest people in the world are right there in Los Alamos. What's happening is there are companies that are operating outside the periphery of Dulce, within the periphery of Dulce, within the periphery of LANL, utilizing technology that is being provided to them by the Greys. One company in particular is now selling a micronuclear reactor design to militaries and governments around the world. Well, this technology was provided to them by the Greys. It's technology that was described by the Colonel in 2010 in our interview that's now just coming out. And they're selling this stuff at hundreds of millions of dollars annually. And this company is an Illuminati corporation. It's a New World Order corporation. And that money goes directly back to whoever is, in charge of the projects and the programs that are taking place at Dulce and Cabazon.
It's kind of that Men in Black type of scenario, that new technologies that are being developed is to aiding to fund the project, basically, correct?
Absolutely. We found that there's an underground facility in Mount Archuleta. Now, this is not the Archuleta Mesa. This is west of the Archuleta Mesa. Mount Archuleta, there is a underground nuclear storage facility that was built there in the 60s by Kirtland Air Force Base that has since been retrofitted for two reasons. One, there's a hangar that operates there for UFO. These are dish-shaped craft that are part gray and part U.S. military or Air Force, possibly some elements of the U.S. Naval Engineering Corps as well. The other half of that facility is used by this company that I'm telling you about, and this company is using it as a research and development and manufacturing facility for those micronuclear reactors that I was telling you about. And they make no bones about what they do. The name of the company is called Hyperion, and you can find them on the internet. And interestingly enough, here's a fact that I think is going to blow your mind away, Henrik. Hyperion is headed by a very powerful woman who in 2010 was awarded the title of Commander of the British Empire by the Queen of England. She holds a dual citizenship in both the UK and in America, United States, and she was awarded that title for her services to the nuclear industry and the international banking and financing industries. How convenient. And get this, Henrik, Hyperion's offices are out of London, Washington, D.C., Los Alamos, and Denver, Colorado. Funny. Isn't that funny? Denver International Airport, DIA, what we know is the new home for the continuity of government should some catastrophic event occur.
That's right. That's right.
So there are just too many coincidences here. I was in August of this year. I was provided 3D models of the Mount Archuleta subsurface structure, and on that day that was being handed to me by Trinity, we were less than 1,000 feet away from a liquid rail tanker that was filled with 29,000 gallons of liquid propane that was accidentally set afire, and there were 4 more next to it. The entire city that I live in, it's a small city, there was a blast radius of 2 to 3 miles that had to be evacuated. My home was in it, and I was just 1,000 feet from it at the exact moment that it was lit on fire when I was receiving this information. Isn't that funny? Interesting.
And the Archuleta Mesa, of course, that's right there on the Colorado state line again. And if we just for a moment talk about underground facilities around the United States, there's even theories obviously out there that they are actually all connected under the ground. There are alleged stories about super fast trains connecting these various sites, but nonetheless, I mean, it's really close right there to Denver, or fairly close anyway. It's to the state line there in Colorado, right? So yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So the southern portion of Colorado is where the Ute American Indian Native, the Native Americans live, and on the New Mexico side is the Hickory Apache. There is a maglev system that operates out of the Alienal periphery. There's a maglev tunnel between the Atoti building in Los Alamos, the township. It goes all the way up to Dulce. From Dulce essentially represents a hub, and Edwards Air Force Base also represents another major hub, and they have connecting, lines all the way out across the United States. I'm told that there's over 10,000 miles of maglev tunnels throughout the United States underground. We just found out that there are 3,000 miles of underground, tunnels that were constructed by the Chinese military, and they admitted to it. So this is not a new phenomenon. This is something that is happening around the world. Pine Gap, Australia, there's a very famous underground facility there that was built in the 1960s. Mind you, there were grays and the CIA that was also involved in the assistance of the constructing towards constructing that facility. So there's a connection between Pine Gap and Dulce.
I want to talk more a little bit about that, but for a moment, if we go back to Hyperion, is this, because I'm reading, I'm doing a little searches on this right here, so HyperionPowerGeneration.com, is that the website for this company you're talking about? Or is
That's the company. That's the company.
Because they have these, they're promoting these transportable power sources, basically, and
liquid metal cooled, and they're micronuclear reactor designs that are cooled using liquid metal. Well, I was already told this information. It was in UFO Highway when it was released in October of 2010. 2011. So this information in UFO Highway was way out before Hyperion started making all of their information readily available on their brand new website.
Interesting. So the Greys are working together with humans. What did Colonel X tell you about them? Who are they? Where did they come from? How deep into it did he get?
So there's a very, very deep and ancient story with respect to the origin of the Greys. There's another group of individuals here on Earth, and their ancestors, which we refer to as the progenitors, we believe that these progenitors were the Anunnaki. So the progenitors who arrived to Earth from Mars after some cataclysmic event occurred on Mars, they have had successive lineages created to survive here on Earth. Well, the very first generation of these progenitors, or Anunnaki, if that's what you want to call them, they created a demigod, the Gigi, which we now know of as the Greys. Those Greys were created to essentially manage the earliest vestiges of humanity, the early humans, hominid, to be slaves, essentially, and mining gold and doing all these other things, agriculture, whatever it was that they needed them to do. The Greys that are in Dulce today were placed there 25,000 years ago. If you go to UFO Highway, if you go to the website UFO Highway, there's a diagram there that illustrates it. There's a section called UFO Highway Sections. When you click on that link, there's a link up there that says The Grey History. You click on The Grey History, there's a diagram that shows the successive generations of the progenitors. The first generation of progenitors were called the Anu, very similar to the Anunnaki. They were the first genetically enhanced offspring. They began to die off, much like the progenitors. The group was genetically enhanced to survive because their biology wasn't compatible with Earth's atmosphere. So then they had a second genetically enhanced offspring called the Ostra albus. When they created the Ostra albus, they also transformed early hominid into modern human. They genetically enhanced us to interbreed with the Ostra albus because they realized that the only way they were going to survive here was if they began to interbreed with humans after they had been transformed into modern humans, what we are today. This is why 250,000 years ago, correlates to this lineage. It resonates with what? Well, the mitochondrial Eve theory that says what? That says we emerged from Africa upright and highly intelligent. Well, we now know why. It's because we were genetically modified. Modern human is the creation. Our genetics have been, manipulated to the umpteenth level, and this is why we are so intelligent. This is why we are unlike any other species on Earth today. So, who are these Ostra albus? Well, they're descendants of the Anu, who are descendants of the progenitor race, which are the Anunnaki. So, who are the Ostra albus today? They make up your New World Order. This is your elite these are the elitist families. David Icke calls them reptilians. I don't know if they're reptilians, but I can tell you this. They are the elites. They are the ones running the show. They are the ones who are 99.999% exactly like humans. They walk like us. They talk like us. They look like us. But they have an alien genetic aspect to them that differs them from us, and they like it that way. That is how they can tell one another apart. And this is how they can maintain these tightly controlled bloodlines and decide who gets in, who gets out, and who stays out. And this is not just limited to Western Europeans, like many people tend to believe. No, right there in Mexico City, Carlos Slim Helú.
That's right.
Yeah, he's the world's probably one of the world's richest men.
Yeah,
well,
that's right.
Isn't it interesting that Carlos Slim Helú, a Mexican, has ties back to the Near East, the Near Middle East, the Near East region? His family traces their lineage back hundreds of years, probably thousands when you think about it, to Lebanon. It just makes sense. Listen, I recently was in Taos, Mexico, and I was sitting down with one of the presenters there. He's a world-famous abductee. He's well-known around the world. I'm not going to say his name, but you can probably figure out who he was if you do the research. He had a genetic... he had his DNA analyzed recently, and he had always believed that, well, both of his parents were of Western European descent. He looks very Western European, very, very fair. Well, guess what they found based off of analysis of his haplotypes and all these other, DNA aspects, aspects of his DNA. They found that both of his parents had lineages traced back to what is modern-day Iraq, which is ancient Sumer, the Mesopotamia region. Is it that money? Is there a correlation? Absolutely, yes, there is a correlation. So these Anunnaki, they came to Earth, they inhabited what we know of as Mesopotamia between the Tigris and the Euphrates River, and from there they have now populated the world with the Australbus, who represent the people that run the New World Order. They are the New World Order. They are the Illuminati.
Well, that's really interesting, and obviously we need to address that more in that sense, obviously what the agenda is, what kind of work that I have been doing here. But before we proceed, though, how did Colonel X get this information? Do you know who told him this? And furthermore, from leading on from that, this information must have been given to the human beings that were working there now, correct? Because they didn't research and find this out for themselves, correct?
That's right. Incredibly, when the colonel was told to report to Dulce via Edwards Air Force Base for this event that had occurred in 1979, he was given a set of briefing documents, very, very thick. It's all described in the book UFO Highway, exactly what was in there. But I can tell you that his team was assembled. This was an ad hoc group of individuals assembled because they met a certain personality type. They each possessed a certain type of persona. It was understood that these individuals would not freak out upon receiving the information that they were going to get for the work that they were to conduct in Dulce. In the briefing documents, it spoke of inhabitants that lived there in Dulce, non-human inhabitants. That was the first bit of shocking information that, was, received by the colonel. And in the briefing documents, it gave detailed information of these inhabitants, who they were, how they were discovered. And once he became an employee of the Dulce, or excuse me, an employee of DSD-3, once he began to work for DSD-3 organization, he had access to gray archaeological tablets. These are metallic sheets with machine-like precision inscriptions. And these inscriptions are based off an alphabet or language, a symbol structure very similar to Akkadian cuneiform. However, much more highly advanced, much more sophisticated, over 2,300 more characters in your typical Akkadian cuneiform, what we understand as Akkadian cuneiform. And this information was all translated. They brought in a specialist from Iraq who essentially, they worked there at Dulce until he died. Dr. Taha Bahir from Iraq was the world's foremost expert in Akkadian cuneiform, or cuneiform in particular. He was also highly talented in mathematics. So they translated everything. They translated everything from these gray archaeological tablets, and that's how they learned the entire history of how the Greys ended up there in Dulce, who the progenitor race was, and the two successive generations or lineages, the Anu and the Australbus. And the Australbus is still a lineage, an active lineage today. And that's, again, these are the people running the show. There's people in China. There's people in Mexico. There's people in Western and even Eastern Europe. There are people in the United States. There are even people in Africa. Everywhere there are elites. Again, David Icke calls them, these reptilians. I don't know if they're reptilians. I'm telling you, they are alien-human hybrids.
Very, very interesting. It's, if we look at some of the other people out there, the type of work that they've done throughout the years when it comes to everything from abductions to the UFO / alien phenomena, there is question in terms of what the motives are, both of the gray and if their agenda obviously extends further as well. We could even look at Jacques Vallée's work, like the messengers of deception. One thing I want to wing by you is this idea that just because it's on a stone tablet, Anthony, that doesn't mean that it's true. What level should we view this on, do you think, when it comes to alleged human history, and that they're talking about them being the creators of us and so forth? That kind of puts us in a kind of already in a slave type of relationship to them, correct?
Absolutely. One of the things that I found most interesting, Hendrik, was that when I discussed all of this with the Colonel, I found that you were going to get the truth out of this gray population that lives there in Dulce, New Mexico. If there is a truth, okay, with respect to the history as you are referring to it, with regards to these Anunnakis, these Igigis, these grays, as we understand them.
Right.
There were two factions of grays there in Dulce. You had these elder grays. They're called the lower level grays, are also referred to as the elder grays. They're essentially the origination of this new creation. Then you have these dissident grays, which are very, very young, almost adolescent. They're only 500 to 600 years old by comparison to the elder grays, who are 5,000 to 10,000 years old. So this dissident gray movement, they did not espouse the doctrine, which is almost a religious doctrine, which much of the information comes from these gray archaeological tablets, that the elder grays do. What I find interesting is that these dissident grays are absolutely anti-Australbus, anti-New World Order. They do not want anything to do with that lineage that comes from the progenitor race, the Anunnaki, because they have the common sense to understand that the elder grays, their parents, so to speak, were placed there to die some 25,000 years ago. The Australbus had infected the Aloha grays, the elder grays, with some type of a disease, and they placed them there to die. And despite knowing that, these elder grays still have this almost devout religious, devotion to that progenitor lineage. And one of the things that they mentioned is that they believe that in the end of 2012, this progenitor race is coming back to Earth. These are off-world progenitors. People who did not go to Mars. Some 1 million years ago. This is another group that's on its way here now. Now, what's interesting about that, Hendrik, is that Mr. X, who was interviewed by Project Camelot, worked at an aerospace facility in Southern California. Prior to his death, he had mentioned to them that one of the pieces of information that he saw was that at the end of 2012, there was going to be some sort of mass landing event that the Western European and the U.S. governments knew of it. Japan knows about this, but that there's nothing that they can do about it, and there's nothing they are going to do about it outside of your typical mind games, such as conditioning through mass media like movies and television shows, getting us ready for such type of an event so that we don't freak out too bad. So At the end of the interview with the Colonel, he had mentioned to me that somebody was going to be contacting the Project Camelot people and me with respect to this individual, this Mr. X who had passed away. This was a peer of Mr. X. Well, we were contacted. We were contacted by a gentleman who worked at a very well-known aerospace company in Southern California. He claims to have worked on the 3rd floor of this facility where there is a vault. He says there are 2 vaults. There are 2 independent Southern California aerospace firms that lease a floor to the federal government. And these vaults are redundant facilities for the primary location, which is Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. What the information is being stored at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and subsequently the secondary and tertiary vaults is every single piece of information between the Greys in the United States government, other ETs in the United States government, because the Greys and the Anunnaki, they're not the only off-world entities. There are others. There's multiple types of Greys. I'm now beginning to learn that there are multiple types of Greys. You have the Greys that were created here on Earth by the progenitor race, and then there are off-world Greys. There are Greys from other planets. There are other ETs. The Anunnaki and the Greys here on Earth do not represent the only ETs. Through cross-correlation of data with groups like Project Camelot and their whistleblowers, I am now finding out that there are many ETs. So these vaults contain all the information on all interaction between the militaries, the governments, individuals, from various, from numerous countries around the world. It's all cataloged. It's all saved. It's all cataloged. And that's what these facilities are for. Now, this individual that came forward and contacted me and Project Camelot simultaneously, I vetted this individual. I have his FAA license. I have his home address. He gave us his phone number. He gave us the office building to where he worked at. He told us what phone number to call, when to call it to verify and validate what we needed to know. And we did. We did. And we know he's telling the truth. So now I know that Mr. X was telling the truth. This individual states, just like Mr. X, that at the end of 2012, some type of event is going to occur. Mind you, Henrik, I don't believe everything I hear from everybody, right? Sure. I'm not in the business of just, blindly trusting everybody. My gut tells me that at the end of 2012, if there is supposed to be some type of mass landing event, there is the high likelihood that it could be a false flag event being committed using HARP technology out of like Norway or out of Gakona, Alaska. The chemtrails that we're seeing, maybe these are chemicals that are seeding the atmosphere so that when they execute this false flag event, it's prepped so that they can project 3D holographic images up there. Maybe the chemtrails are also, embedding some type of a chemical substance into us so that we can, easily facilitate our belief into whatever it is we're going to witness. I don't know. Maybe it will be a real arrival of an ET. I do not know. But again, I'm asking all the questions, not just taking a blind trust into one, opinion that's being espoused. But it's interesting that 2 individuals who worked at these vaults said that there was something that was going to happen at the end of 2012.
The stage is set, it seems. I mean, hold on to your pants, folks, because we're going to be played like a fiddle, I think, in 2012. We'll see what happens and how much that's going to be ramped up. And I should say, Anthony, this could be it could be false flag, it could be a stage for all we know. There is alleged cloning programs ongoing, meaning we don't even know if something showed up that it actually would be an alien race. It could be something made, if you will, here on Earth even. But we'll get into a little bit more of this, obviously, in the next segment. There's one more thing I want to ask you before we just talk briefly here about the book and take a little break here. But during the interview, did Colonel X show you any photos or other types of document to back up his claims, Anthony?
Absolutely. He brought out for me 4 Polaroid photographs that he had taken using a security incident camera. One of them was of a gray weapon. This is a plasma-based directed energy weapon that they used there at Dulce the Grace. And it's also the weapons It's also the basis for the technology that is being used at the Cabazon Wackenhut underground facility, where they're creating these weapons there. He also showed me a gray human security access panel. There's a picture of that in the book. There's the one of the hangars, the TAD-1 hangar, it's a UFO hangar with very, very unique properties to it, which you want to read about. And one of the corridors, the massive corridors with the lighting systems and the almost granite-like, super highly polished flooring systems there at Dulce. So yeah, there was definitely 4 photographs that were shown to me, and they're in the book.
Excellent. We're talking about the book UFO Highway with Anthony Sanchez, and the website again is ufohighway.com. Head on over there and look through the archives, look through